In the quiet valley of Wheeler's Hollow, a young Army veteran thought he was finally free to breathe again. But one midnight call changed everything. His grandfather had fallen, the family farm was collapsing, and someone in the shadows was circling Rowan Ridge, not for its fields, but for the treasure buried beneath its soil. When Caleb Rowan returned with his loyal German shepherd at his side, he didn't just come home. He stepped straight into a web of betrayal, hidden letters from a grandmother long gone, and a truth powerful enough to split his family in two. This is not just a story about land or legacy. It's about loyalty, sacrifice, and the kind of love that survives even when everyone else walks away. Please support us by subscribing to the channel to follow this emotional journey. A pale coastal mist drifted over the Oregon shoreline as night settled in, carrying the smell of salt, wet sand, and pine. Caleb Rowan stood near the back of his dusty SUV, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket, watching the tide press and retreat, with the slow steadiness that had become his only form of therapy these past weeks. After 8 relentless years in the U.S. Army, years marked by sandstorms, night patrols, and the quiet weight of decisions he still carried, Caleb, now 30, had finally stepped away from service 3 months earlier. He'd driven to the coast for peace, hoping the sound of waves could drown out the tension still wired into his muscles. Odin, his 5-year-old German shepherd, sat beside him with alert amber eyes. The dog was large, sturdy, and scarred slightly around the muzzle from a training accident during deployment. Odin was disciplined but gentle, deeply loyal, and constantly watching Caleb as if reading every shift of breath. Caleb often wondered if Odin sensed the exhaustion he tried not to show, the restlessness, the emptiness, the strange mix of freedom and loss that came after leaving the uniform behind. He was packing up for the night when his phone buzzed. The name on the screen froze him. Grandpa Silas. Silas Rowan wasn't the type to call unless there was real need. He was 78. Tall despite age, with wind-burned skin, white hair that never obeyed a comb, and a posture shaped by decades of ranch work. A stern man to outsiders, but to Caleb he had always been the steady voice of reason, patient, firm, with the slow humor of an Idaho rancher who'd lived too long to rush anything. Caleb answered immediately. "Grandpa?" The voice that came through was thin, ragged. "Caleb, boy, I need a favor." A pause, a shaking breath. "I fell. At the barn. The damn steps. They're slick this time of year. Broke my right leg clean, the doctors say. They've got me at the small hospital down in Hollow Ridge." Caleb straightened, heart thudding. Odin lifted his head at the tension in Caleb's voice. "Are you alone? Who's helping you?" "No one," Silas admitted, each word strained. "Your cousins are busy with their own lives. Your mom and dad." He hesitated, and Caleb felt the familiar tightening in his chest. "They want me to sell the ranch, son. Say it's time. Say I can't keep up anymore." Caleb swallowed hard. He knew his parents' stance. They'd argued for years that Rowan Ridge, the family ranch in Wheeler's Hollow, was too much for an old man to run. His grandmother Maeve had held it together until her passing 5 years ago, but after she was gone, Silas had chosen to fight the land alone. "I'm sorry to ask," Silas said softly, "but I don't have anyone else to call." Caleb didn't think, didn't weigh options. The decision rose like instinct. "I'm coming home, Grandpa. Right now." There was a long exhale on the other, chinned half relief, half guilt. "I didn't want to pull you from your break. You earned that rest." Caleb looked at the dark waves rolling under moonlight. Some things matter more. When the call ended, Caleb loaded the last bag into the SUV. Odin circled once, sensing urgency, tail stiff, ears forward. "We're going home," Caleb murmured, rubbing the dog's neck. "Back to Wheeler's Hollow." The road stretched wide and black ahead, the kind that made a man think about everything he tried to forget. Caleb drove through the night, fingers gripping the wheel, flashes of memory surfacing. Him, as a boy, riding beside Silas in the old truck. Maeve's laugh drifting from the porch, the scent of hay and soil after summer storms. Memories soft at the edges, but sharp enough to remind him what he'd lost by leaving. By dawn, he arrived at Hollow Ridge Community Hospital, a small building of brick and aging white trim. Odin stayed in the car while Caleb rushed inside. The hallways smelled of antiseptic and old linoleum. A nurse with warm brown skin, curly hair pinned back, and tired yet kind eyes met him at the desk. Her name tag read Nurse Evelyn Ward. She was in her mid-40s, slightly round in build, with a calm professionalism that suggested she'd seen every type of emergency small towns could produce. "You're here for Mr. Silas Rowan?" she asked gently. "He's stable. Tough old gentleman." Caleb managed a small smile. He always has been. She led him to a quiet room where Silas lay in a hospital bed, leg in a cast, face pale beneath his scruff of white beard. But his eyes, blue, clear, stubborn, lit up at the sight of his grandson. "There you are," he whispered. "Didn't take you long." Caleb squeezed his grandfather's hand, careful of the IV. "You scared me." "Not my intention," Silas murmured. "Guess these old bones don't bounce like they used to." Their reunion was brief. A doctor soon entered, a tall man in his early 50s named Dr. Hawthorne, with sharp features, salt gray hair, and a measured way of speaking that hinted at decades of balancing truth and compassion. He greeted Caleb with a solemn nod. "Your grandfather is lucky. The fall could have been worse." Caleb exhaled. So the leg is the only concern?" Dr. Hawthorne paused, glancing at Silas before motioning Caleb into the hallway. Something cold slid across Caleb's nerves. The doctor lowered his voice. "Mr. Rowan didn't want to alarm you, but the scans revealed early signs of cardiac decline. Nothing catastrophic yet, but he's been hiding symptoms for months." Caleb's breath stopped. "He didn't tell anyone? That generation rarely does," Dr. Hawthorne replied gently. "But you needed to know." Caleb stared through the window at his grandfather resting in the bed. Suddenly, the 8 years he'd spent away felt heavier than his entire service record. He'd come home thinking he could help for a while. He now understood Rowan Ridge might need him far longer than he expected. And his grandfather might need him most of all. The morning sky over Wheeler's Hollow held a dull, pewter-colored light as Caleb turned down the winding dirt road leading toward Rowan Ridge. The land stretched open and wide, faded autumn grass, patches of frost still clinging to the earth, and the distant outline of the ridge rising like a dark spine against the horizon. It felt familiar, and yet something in the air carried an edge he didn't remember from childhood. Dean sat upright in the passenger seat, ears stiff, watching every passing fence post as though measuring what had changed since he'd last run across this land as a puppy. When Caleb pulled into the yard, his breath caught. The ranch didn't look ill. It looked worn down, tired in a way that suggested months, maybe years, of slow decline. The wooden pump house leaned slightly to the right, its shingles curling at the edges. The old well pump stuttered with a sharp metallic rattle when Caleb pushed the handle, only to release a thin, muddy stream instead of clean water. A coil of anxiety tightened in his stomach. His grandfather would never have let it get this bad unless he truly couldn't keep up. As Caleb walked further, Odin trotted ahead, nose low, tail held stiff. The dog paused near the cattle gate and let out a low growl. Caleb knelt, brushing aside churned soil. Tire marks sliced through the earth, deep grooves that didn't match the pattern of any ranch vehicle Silas had ever owned. He followed them with narrowed eyes, until they disappeared into the western pasture. Someone had driven through recently. Someone comfortable enough to approach the property without hiding their tracks. A figure emerged from behind the barn. Hector Salinas, the ranch's remaining hired hand. Hector was in his early 40s, short and sturdily built, with skin tanned by years under Idaho sun. His hair was black and cropped close, streaked with a touch of silver at the sides, and he had a trim beard peppered with gray. His brown eyes, usually warm, carried a guarded tension today. A man like Hector rarely worried easily. He'd grown up working in orchards near the Montana border, lost a brother in a logging accident, and learned early that life tested you whether you asked for it or not. Yet something about Rowan Ridge in recent months had unsettled even him. "Caleb," he greeted, wiping his hands on his faded work jeans. "Didn't think I'd see you back here so soon." Caleb shook his hand firmly. "Didn't think I'd be back this soon either. Grandpa's doing okay, but it'll be slow." Hector nodded with sympathy. "He's stubborn, too stubborn for his own good." They walked toward the cattle barn together. The hinges squeaked when Caleb nudged the gate. And to his surprise, the latch swung open with barely any resistance. The padlock hung from the loop, closed but loosely, as if someone had placed it there without actually locking it. Caleb examined it closely. No cut marks, no scratches, just deliberately unsecured. "Was it like this yesterday?" he asked. Hector exhaled heavily. "That's the problem. It was locked right yesterday morning. But last night—" He glanced toward the tree line at the far edge of the field. "I saw movement out there, flashlights. Could have been teenagers messing around, but teenagers around here don't cut across ranch property. Not with Silas's reputation." Caleb's jaw tightened. "How long has this been happening?" Hector hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "Couple of weeks, maybe more. I didn't want to stress your grandpa. Man's been through enough. But someone's been snooping around, walking the fence lines at night, checking the outbuildings." Odin sniffed aggressively near the barn posts, then let out a sharp bark. Caleb knelt beside the dog, letting Odin guide him. The German shepherd pressed his nose against a spot on the wooden beam, inhaling deeply. His ears lowered, not in fear, but in recognition. Caleb felt a chill crawl up his spine. "You know that scent?" he murmured to Odin. The dog pawed at the beam, then looked toward the main road, toward the direction any visitor from town would arrive from. Odin only reacted that way to scents connected to people he had known before, people who had spent time in the house, people in the Rowan family. Caleb rose slowly, mind spinning. That didn't make sense. His family rarely visited, almost never. As if sensing his doubt, Hector lowered his voice. "There's something else." He looked around as though checking for watchers. A company's been sniffing around. Silver Line Development, slick suits, shiny shoes, city accents. They say they want to invest in rural land. Caleb stiffened. Invest how? Buyout, development. Build whatever rich people want these days. Vacation homes, luxury cabins. They tried talking to your grandfather twice. He turned them away. Hector's expression darkened. But then someone started showing them around when Silas wasn't home. Someone who knew the ranch. Caleb's pulse hammered. Someone from the family? Hector only nodded. They wouldn't say who, but they kept calling him their in-mid man. The anger that rose in Caleb's chest wasn't hot. It was cold, controlled, the same icy restraint he'd learned in the army. Betrayal didn't surprise him anymore. But betrayal from inside his own blood still stung deeper than he liked to admit. As he walked back toward the yard, something glinted beneath a patch of frost. Caleb crouched, brushing the ice aside. The imprint was clear, a tire tread with a distinct zigzag pattern. He recognized it instantly. Only one person in the Rowan family owned a truck with tires like that, a compact silver pickup with oversized mud-terrain wheels. Merrick Rowan, his estranged cousin, a man Caleb hadn't seen in nearly a decade. The twist tightened like a knot in Caleb's chest. Merrick had been here recently, and nothing good ever followed that man. A thin veil of late afternoon sunlight filtered through the gaps in the old barn's warped boards, casting long amber stripes across the dusty floor as Caleb stepped inside with Odin close at his heel. The air smelled faintly of hay and rust, mixed with the familiar coolness of Idaho autumn that seeped through every crack. It wasn't the place he wanted to search, but after seeing Merrick's tire tracks, he needed answers, and answers often hid in the places people forgot to look. The barn had been silent for years, except for the occasional storm rattling the tin roof or Odin's footsteps when he wandered through as a younger dog. Now, as Caleb slid open the storage loft door, dust plumed upward like a sigh released after too long. He scanned the cramped shelves until his eyes caught a wooden crate tucked beneath a broken saddle stand, the lid marked with faded handwriting. Maeve Rowan, his grandmother's name. The loops of her writing struck him like a memory, steady, patient, unmistakably hers. Caleb knelt, prying open the crate with stiff fingers. Inside, bundles of letters wrapped in twine rested beside a leather-bound journal and folded parchment maps. Odin sniffed the edge of the crate before settling at Caleb's side, ears perked as though sensing the emotional shift that rolled through his owner. The first stack of letters dated back more than 10 years. Tucked between envelopes were small notes written on grocery receipts or torn notepad scraps. His grandmother had always jotted thoughts down quickly, as if she feared important ideas would slip away if she didn't trap them on paper. Her voice felt alive in the ink. Your grandfather is working too hard again. I keep telling him land has moods. One must listen to it before deciding anything. Another letter carried a sharper tone. Someone came today asking strange questions about the soil on the west slope. Claimed to be interested in geology, but his eyes stayed on the acreage lines more than the ground. Caleb exhaled slowly. He remembered Maeve as gentle but perceptive, a woman with silvery hair braided tight and warm green eyes that read people like open books. She'd run the household with quiet endurance, but she'd never been naive. If she sensed danger, she wasn't the type to imagine it. He opened her journal next, careful with its fragile spine. Most entries were brief: weather notes, cattle births, business costs. But several pages had been marked with thin strips of cloth. He turned to one of them. There is tension among the family. Not spoken, but there, like the low rumble before a storm. Some see the ranch as a legacy to protect, others as opportunity. Caleb stiffened at the word opportunity. He could practically hear his mother's arguments echoing it. Sell, upgrade, move on. To them, land was a commodity. To Maeve, it had been a heartbeat. As he sorted through the papers, Odin's low growl cut through the silence. The dog was sniffing near a stack of old crates behind the feed bin. Caleb followed him and spotted something wedged between two boards. A small metal device with a digital screen, caked in dirt. A soil analyzer, commercial grade, expensive, and definitely not something that belonged on a cattle ranch. Caleb flipped it over. The company sticker was half scratched off, but what remained was unmistakable. Silverline Development, Site Survey Equipment. His jaw clenched. They'd been sneaking onto the property long before they had the guts to knock on Silas Rowan's door. He felt a chill crawl slowly up his spine. This wasn't coincidence. Someone with access had let them in. He returned to the crate and picked up a folded map. Maeve's handwriting labeled several areas: soft ground, unstable ridge, water table shift, avoid building. She'd mapped out geological risks years before any corporation showed interest. Had she known they would ignore natural warnings just to chase profit? Another cloth marker guided him to her final journal entries. The last page, trembling slightly in his grip, held a sentence that froze him. If a day comes when Silas grows weak, someone must return. Someone who loves this land without wanting to own it. Someone who will protect him and the ridge. That someone is you, Caleb. His breath hitched. His grandmother hadn't predicted the future. She had understood people far too well. She had sensed the fractures forming long before they became visible. She had seen that Silas would never ask for help, that the family would eventually divide over land, and that Caleb, restless, wandering, searching for meaning, would someday need something to anchor him again. Before he could process the weight of those words, Odin gave a sharp bark and ran toward the barn door. Footsteps crunched outside, slow, measured, unfamiliar. Caleb's muscles tightened instinctively, the soldier in him rising to the surface. He reached for the nearest tool, a rusted crowbar lying on the shelf, and lowered his stance. The barn door creaked, and a silhouette paused at the threshold. Not Merrick, not a family member. A stranger, tall and lean, dressed in an immaculate charcoal jacket and polished shoes that had no business on ranch soil. His hair was sandy blonde, perfectly styled, his expression smooth and professionally pleasant. "Mr. Rowan?" the man asked, voice too casual, too confident. "My name is Elliot Crane, Regional Acquisitions Officer with Silverline Development. I believe we have some matters to discuss regarding your grandfather's land." Caleb didn't relax. The letters in his hand suddenly felt heavier than the crowbar. The stranger's polished smile didn't reach his eyes, and Caleb understood this wasn't a conversation. It was the beginning of a confrontation. The sky over Rowan Ridge darkened into a slate-blue wash as storm clouds gathered, low and heavy, pressing the air into a tense stillness. Caleb felt the shift before he saw the headlights approaching. Two beams cutting through the dust of the ranch road, rolling steadily toward the house. Odin stiffened beside him, tail rigid, nose lifted as the scent reached him. Caleb didn't need the dog's warning to know who it was. The Rowan family always arrived with noise, with judgment, with intention. The SUV stopped near the porch, and his parents stepped out. David Rowan, Caleb's father, was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with thinning dark hair combed back in neat lines. His jaw was square but softened with age, and his expression carried an exhaustion that had little to do with the long drive. His cautious movements reflected a man who once dreamed big but had grown wary after too many financial failures, failed investments, a business deal gone wrong, and years of living with the shame of those mistakes. Beside him stood Marlene Rowan, Caleb's mother, a tall, slender woman with perfectly arranged ash-blonde hair and a wardrobe that didn't belong anywhere near dirt. Her sharp blue eyes were keen, impatient, always searching for control in situations that didn't offer it. She crossed her arms before even greeting him. "We need to talk. Inside." Caleb reluctantly led them into the kitchen, where the scent of old pine wood and the faintest trace of his grandmother's herbal tea still lingered in the walls. His father spoke first, voice low. "Son, we came because this situation can't go on. Your grandfather is in the hospital. You're struggling with the land. We think it's time to do what's practical." Marlene stepped closer, lowering her voice in the way she always did before delivering a blow. "We're recommending that Silas sells Rowan Ridge. Silverline made an offer weeks ago, a generous one. It's the responsible choice." Caleb clenched his jaw. "I'm not selling." David exhaled. "Caleb, there's something I should have told you earlier." He rubbed the bridge of his nose, a nervous habit he'd had since Caleb was a child. "I signed a land assessment for Silverline last month. It wasn't a sale, just an evaluation. They needed it to put together the offer. I thought it would buy us time, but you opened the door, Caleb said quietly, anger forming a cold weight in his chest. You let them onto the property. Before David could answer, gravel crunched outside again. Odin barked sharply, and they all turned as a pickup door slammed. Caleb felt the anger sharpen into something darker. Merrick Rowan strode toward the porch with the arrogant confidence of a man who believed the land already belonged to him. He was in his mid-30s, tall with a wiry athletic build, and sandy brown hair buzzed close on the sides. A trimmed goatee framed a smirk that rarely left his face. His eyes, pale hazel, always calculating, reflected a lifetime of cutting corners and slipping responsibility whenever trouble arose. Growing up, Merrick had been the cousin with broken promises, quick tempers, and a talent for charming people into bad decisions. He stepped inside without knocking. Heard the family meeting started without me. He looked Caleb over with disdainful amusement. Didn't know you were still playing rancher, cousin. Caleb stepped forward. What are you doing here? Checking on my investment, Merrick replied smoothly. Silverline wants to move fast, and I want to make sure we don't have unnecessary delays. Marlene tensed. David looked away. The truth was already unfolding without Caleb needing to push. Still, he pushed anyway. You've been letting them onto the land, Caleb said. You walked them right through here while Grandpa was alone. Merrick's grin widened. Someone had to. You were off surfing beaches and pretending the world owed you peace after the army. His voice turned mocking. You're not cut out to run Rowan Ridge. Never were. Caleb didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he walked toward the stairs. If everything you're saying is honest, then you won't mind answering a few questions. He crouched beneath the staircase where an old iron safe was bolted into the wall. Odin stayed close, sniffing around as if verifying the danger. The safe's lock stuck slightly from disuse, but soon the metal door swung open. Inside were yellowed envelopes, property evaluations, and ledger books. Caleb shuffled through them until he found a thick envelope labeled Ridge Estate, Confidential. He opened it on the kitchen table. Papers spilled out. A land valuation report signed by David Rowan. A preliminary partnership agreement between Merrick Rowan and Silverline Development. A handwritten note. Merrick, Easel's internal introducer. Marlene gasped. David swallowed hard. Merrick's smirk faltered for the first time. So that's it, Caleb said quietly. You weren't helping Grandpa. You were helping Silverline. Merrick's face tightened. It's business, Caleb. Something you clearly don't understand. But Caleb was no longer listening. Something had shifted inside the safe. Something metallic had slid free. He reached deeper and felt a small compartment he didn't know existed. A hidden drawer. Inside was a tarnished brass key attached to a string. A faded tag dangled from it, written in Maeve's unmistakable cursive. The key to the truth is not in this house, but in the forest. Caleb froze. His heart pounded like distant thunder rolling across the ridge. Whatever his grandmother had hidden in those woods, whatever she feared his family might do, it was waiting for him now. The forest beyond Rowan Ridge carried a stillness that felt older than memory itself. The morning air hung cold and metallic, the kind that sharpened breath as Caleb and Odin trekked deeper into the pines. Needles crunched under their boots, and thin shafts of sunlight cut through branches like pale blades. Beneath the quiet, Caleb sensed a pressure, an invisible weight, as if the ridge was holding secrets tightly in its roots. Odin stayed close, his black and tan coat catching the light, ears swiveling at the slightest sound. The dog seemed unusually alert today, sniffing the wind with a cautious intensity. Caleb didn't blame him. They both felt the shift. Maeve's key wasn't guiding them to sentiment. It was guiding them to something buried. The map Maeve had drawn decades earlier was tucked into Caleb's jacket, its ink fading but her handwriting unmistakably steady. It marked one tree near the western rise, a tall old ponderosa, thicker than the others, scarred by lightning long ago. When they reached it, the air felt heavier, and even Odin paused, tail lowered. Caleb knelt at the base of the tree. Using a hand shovel, he cleared away a patch of soil. At barely a foot deep, metal scraped against metal. A small steel lockbox emerged, dirt pressed into its seams like the ridge had tried to swallow it whole. The key slid in smoothly, as if waiting for this moment. Inside lay folders bound tightly with string, weathered but protected from moisture. Caleb lifted the first one and unfolded papers carefully, old property assessments, surveying notes, and geological overlays of Rowan Ridge. But in the second bundle he found something far more startling, a full geological survey done nearly 20 years ago by a geologist named Howard Pritchard, a man Caleb vaguely remembered from childhood, a middle-aged scientist with salt and pepper hair, a quiet voice, and a habit of sketching rocks for fun. He'd disappeared abruptly after a single summer. Maeve's handwritten note clipped to the report read, "There is more under this land than cattle and soil. If people come asking, it's not the ranch they seek, it's what lies beneath." According to Pritchard's report, beneath Rowan Ridge flowed a rare mineral vein, small, but valuable enough for developers to covet, enough to justify harassment, enough to explain Silverline's stubborn interest. Caleb sat back against the tree, jaw tightening. This wasn't about land for vacation homes. This was extraction, ruin. He imagined Silverline carving the ridge open, and his stomach knotted. Odin suddenly growled low. Caleb stiffened, listening. Twigs snapped somewhere deeper in the woods. But after a tense moment, silence returned. Caleb secured the documents in his pack. If Silverline ever got these papers, Rowan Ridge was finished. Back at the ranch, the weight of the discovery only made the silence of the house feel more intrusive. Caleb wasted no time. Using skills from military surveillance operations, he set up motion-triggered cameras around the property, fence lines, the barn, the well house, and the livestock gate. By sunset, Odin followed his every step, sensing the urgency. Hours later, at nearly midnight, the device on Caleb's nightstand vibrated, a silent alert. Motion detected. Odin growled before the screen even lit. Caleb tapped the notification. Grainy infrared footage appeared. Two figures moved across the yard toward the old well, one tall, broad-shouldered, the other lean, with a stiff posture that screamed corporate training. Caleb zoomed in. His pulse hammered. Merrick Rowan. No surprise there. He moved like he owned the soil beneath his boots. But the second man, Caleb enhanced the frame until the grain sharpened into clarity. A smooth, calculated face with slick dark hair, a clean-shaven jaw, and a practiced smile that had felt wrong the moment Caleb had seen it weeks ago. He remembered the firm handshake, the expensive watch, the rehearsed charm. Darren Cole, the Silverline representative who had convinced David Rowan to sign the land assessment. The same man who had called the evaluation routine. The same man who insisted the family do the sensible thing. He was here, on the ranch, at midnight, trespassing with Merrick. Caleb watched in icy silence as Darren knelt beside the well, opening a sleek black case. He pulled out equipment, soil probes, sample jars, tools far too professional for innocent curiosity. Merrick kept watch, glancing over his shoulder with restless impatience. Odin barked sharply at the screen, teeth bared. Caleb tightened his grip on the phone. Every suspicion Maeve had carried, every warning hidden in her letters, every line on the old maps. It was all true. Silverline wasn't courting the family. They were infiltrating it. And Merrick had sold them the front door key. Caleb saved the footage, secured every file, prepared every safeguard. He felt something shift inside him, not rage, not fear, but a soldier's resolve waking after too long a sleep. Rowan Ridge needed protection. So did Silas. And now Caleb knew exactly who he was fighting. Wind tore across Rowan Ridge like a restless animal, rattling loose boards and sweeping dust in swirling ribbons under the moonlight. Caleb had felt storms before, both on land and on battlefields, but this one carried a tension that prickled along his skin. Odin paced near the porch, tail stiff, chest rumbling with uneasy growls. Caleb kneeled beside him, stroking the dog's bristling fur. "Easy, boy. What is it?" Odin rarely acted without reason. His instincts had saved lives before, Caleb's included. When the dog suddenly snapped upright and bolted toward the cattle barn, barking violently, Caleb didn't hesitate. He grabbed the flashlight from the wall, sprinting after him. The smell hit first, burning hay, sharp and bitter. A flicker of orange light licked through the barn slats. No. Caleb shoved the door open. A small fire crackled near the feed corner, flames no higher than his knee. Odin barked sharply at the far end of the barn, where footsteps pounded against the wooden ramp. Someone was fleeing. Caleb grabbed the fire extinguisher, dousing the flames in a quick practice sweep. His heart hammered. This wasn't a careless spark. Someone had deliberately set it, and had been scared off before it grew. Subtle sabotage. Damage just enough to push fear, not devastation. Logical, calculated, not chaotic. "Odin, chase!" The German shepherd tore through the side door, paws pounding the dirt as he followed the scent trail across the field. Caleb sprinted behind him, breath burning in his chest, boots slamming the ground. Moonlight cast long shadows as the figure ahead stumbled over a fence and darted toward the creek line. Odin launched forward, snarling. The fleeing man, a lanky figure in a dark jacket, looked back in panic. He was young, maybe late 20s, with greasy blonde hair, a thin, nervous face, and darting eyes that suggested a man accustomed to doing dirty work without understanding the whole picture. Odin leapt, grabbing his arm and dragging him to the ground with controlled precision. The man screamed, raising his free hand. Okay, don't kill me, man." Caleb arrived, breath heaving, wrenching the intruder's hood back. The stranger trembled beneath him. "Please don't. This wasn't my idea." His voice cracked, revealing someone easily manipulated, a follower rather than a thinker. "Name," Caleb demanded. Zachary Briggs. Silverline hired me for sight pressure. I swear that's what they called it. I didn't mean for the fire to get big." Caleb's jaw clenched. "Where's Merrick?" Zachary swallowed hard. "He ran, said he'd distract you, said you wouldn't catch both of us." His eyes flicked upward, terrified. "Please, call off the dog." Caleb tapped Odin's shoulder. The dog released, but stayed close, lips curled in a silent warning. Caleb dragged Zachary to his feet, but before he could say another word, he saw headlights bouncing across the dirt road. A truck swerved into the yard, his father's. David Rowan stumbled out, face ghost pale under the harsh beams. His hand shook as he rushed forward. "Caleb, thank God. Are you hurt?" His voice was raw with fear. "I'm fine," Caleb said, keeping his grip on Zachary. "But you'd better start talking, Dad." David's shoulders sagged as if the truth itself crushed him. He looked older tonight, the wrinkles around his eyes deeper, the guilt carved along his jaw unmistakable. "I didn't sabotage anything, I swear to you." He pushed a trembling hand through his thinning hair. "But I may have told Merrick things. Things about the schedule, about the new security cameras, about you fixing the well house." Caleb's blood ran cold. "You what?" "I thought he was trying to help you," David blurted. He told me selling the land would secure your future, that Silverline would pay enough for you to start over, somewhere safe, somewhere easier than this cursed ridge." His voice cracked with a mixture of shame and desperation. I didn't know they were after minerals. I didn't know anything about the ridge's geology. I just wanted my son to stop carrying burdens alone. Zachary whimpered. "Silverline doesn't care about families, man. They care about what's under your feet." David flinched. Caleb's anger ebbed into something heavier, betrayal tangled with sorrow. His father wasn't malicious, just misled, again, a pattern Caleb had watched his entire life. "Dad," Caleb said softly, "you have to stop trusting the wrong people." David nodded shakily. "I know. And I have something I should have given you earlier." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, thick, sealed, and marked in Silas Rowan's shaky handwriting. Caleb's breath caught. "He gave me this a week before the fall," David confessed. "Told me to pass it to you if things grew dark. I didn't understand then, but I do now." Caleb opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single page, written in his grandfather's rough, unsteady script. "The will was set 2 years ago, everything arranged. You are the one I trust. Protect the ridge." The words blurred as the weight of them sank through Caleb's chest. Silverline was coming. Merrick had chosen his side, and Silas had chosen his. A soft gold dusk settled over Wheeler's Hollow, the first gentle sky in days, brushing the ridge with warmth that felt almost like forgiveness. The wind was calmer now, carrying only the faint scent of pine and the quiet whistle of fading storm gusts. Caleb stood at the porch railing, Odin sitting at his side, both watching dust rise from a car turning up the long drive. The hospital van slowed to a stop, and the door opened. Silas Rowan stepped out slowly, leaning heavily on a pair of polished wooden crutches. The old man looked smaller somehow, his frame thinner beneath the faded green flannel shirt he insisted on wearing, though his eyes, steel blue and sharp with stubborn grit, remained unchanged. His silver hair, cut shorter from his hospital stay, glinted beneath the afternoon light. There was age in his movements, yes, but no frailty in his spirit. Silas Rowan was a man who had survived droughts, bad winters, and the slow fading of friends. Nothing in his posture hinted he was ready to surrender the ridge. Caleb approached him, bracing a hand under his grandfather's elbow. Silas grunted. "I'm not porcelain, boy." "I know," Caleb said gently, "but you're still on 2 crutches." Silas didn't argue, only offered a faint smirk that carried years of unspoken pride. Inside the farmhouse, the living room filled quickly. David and Marlene Rowan sat together, tension softening in their faces now that Silas was home. Merrick, of course, was absent, arrested that morning after Zachary Briggs provided a full statement to the sheriff. A deputy named Clint Mayweather, a tall, broad officer with a worn beige mustache and a calm, authoritative voice, had explained that Merrick faced charges for trespassing, attempted arson, and collusion with a corporate developer. Silverline's name appeared in every report. Silas settled into his old recliner, hands gripping the armrests with purpose. His voice, though raspy from hospital air, carried command that quieted the entire room. "We're having this meeting because enough damage has been done, family damage, land damage, trust damage. And before this ridge gets pulled apart any further, we need the truth said out loud." Marlene bowed her head. David shifted uncomfortably. Caleb remained standing, Odin beside him like a steady shadow. Silas reached into his coat and produced a thick envelope, the same color as the one David had given Caleb, but larger, heavier. "Your grandmother feared this would happen," he began. "Maeve was no fool. She had an instinct about people. She saw greed long before it showed its teeth." He tapped the envelope. "She made me promise something before she died. A hard promise. one I questioned until now. His voice softened, the old grief flickering in his eyes. She told me to hold Rowan Ridge only until the right person came home. David looked confused. Marlene bit her lip. Silas continued. This ridge needed someone who didn't want it for money. Someone who didn't see the land as a burden or a business transaction. Someone who stayed, not because they were trapped, but because they chose it. His eyes settled on Caleb. And that person is you. David inhaled sharply. Dad. Silas raised a hand. No, this isn't up for debate. He opened the envelope and pulled out a notarized document, signatures, stamps, everything legally binding. Maeve and I signed the will 2 years ago. Rowan Ridge, every fence post, every acre, every animal, belongs to Caleb. The silence that followed held shock, acceptance, and quiet surrender. David rubbed his face with both hands. Why didn't you tell us? Because, Silas replied, if you'd known sooner, Silverline would have sunk its claws into all of you. And I needed Caleb to come back by choice, not by inheritance. His gaze softened. And he did. There was no anger in David's expression now, only regret and humbled understanding. I'm sorry, he whispered. I never meant to cause this mess. Caleb stepped forward, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. We fix it from here, together. Later, as the house quieted, Caleb walked the property with Odin. The ranch felt different now, lighter, as though a long-held breath had finally been released. The well pump, still damaged from Silverline's tampering, needed repair. The horse stalls required sanding and new hinges. The western field, scarred by tire tracks, would need reseeding. But Caleb saw not problems, only beginnings. He spent days repairing the well house with Hector, whose strong, weathered hands worked with renewed purpose. They rehung doors in the horse barn, cleaned decades-old dust from the rafters, cleared debris Merrick's men had left behind, and restored the fencing along the western slope. With the mineral vein now fully understood, Caleb contacted environmental consultants, not to exploit the ridge, but to protect it legally from future extraction. Then came his new project, something he had dreamed of quietly since leaving the Army. The Rowan Ridge Recovery Program, a small-scale therapeutic retreat for veterans with PTSD. Trail riding, open country therapy, quiet land to breathe in. A place to heal the parts of war that doctors often couldn't reach. Caleb had seen men break. He had been close to breaking himself. This ridge had saved him. Now it could save others. Odin, as always, stayed by his side through every repair, every plan, every sunrise. One afternoon, as Caleb and the dog hiked along a rocky path near the ridge's edge, Odin veered suddenly toward a crevice between boulders, barking with urgency. Caleb followed and found a small rusted metal mailbox wedged deep within the stone. His breath caught. He pulled it free and pried it open. Inside lay a folded note wrapped around a tiny wooden horse figurine that his grandmother had carved for him when he was 8. The note, written in Maeve's graceful hand, read, "Caleb, the land does not need the strongest. It needs the one who refuses to leave it behind." The sun lowered behind the ridge, casting a golden glow across every field and fence line. Caleb stood quietly, Odin leaning against his leg as he looked over Rowan Ridge, his ridge now. Whole. Safe. Finally in the hands of someone who would never abandon it. The ridge belonged to the one who stayed. Sometimes God's miracles don't arrive with thunder. They come quietly, through people who stay, who love, and who refuse to give up. Caleb learned that hope can rise even from broken places, and maybe you're carrying a ridge of your own today. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs strength. Comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith and healing. May God bless you, protect your home, and guide you through every storm.